Welcome back, everyone. If you remember in our previous videos, one of our previous videos, we said when we were talking about nesting if branches, we said that usually this practice is used by developers where they want to use their first main if branch to check for values that they would, if they return true, they would just automatically get out of this method, right? And then proceed with other statements. This is to save resources of checking for other conditions, and this speeds up the processing time. Okay, now the time has come to look at the options that Java gives us as developers to be able to break our own codes. So to do so, let's create a new class. We will call this class defective divider. Now, let's say right now I'm just going to save us some time. I'm not going to create the scanner class, but we will test our code by our own test values. We're going to create a method. We'll call it a divider. This method is going to take two numbers, two integers. This method is going to accept two parameters. So int num1 and int num2. This method is going to do the following. It's just going to print out num1, concatenate a string that consists of a space, / and space, then concatenate number2, concatenate another string that will be consisting of space equal to space, and it will concatenate the output, the result of num1 divided by num2. Simple method, right? It's called divider, so it divides num1 by num2. So let's create some test values for this method. Test values. So we're going to say 5 by 5. We're going to say 5 by 3. We're going to say 3 by 5. And we're going to test values 5 by 0. We're going to test value, what else do we have left? For example, 5 by 1. Okay? So we'll start testing our values. We'll start testing our method by using these possible values. Let's add one negative value here. Let's do -3 divided by 5. So let's call our method divider, and let's pass our first test argument, 5 and 5. Our method accepts two variables, right? Do not forget to pause this video and add a basic explanation, basic documentation comment on what this method does. All right, so let's run this. Our first run, our divider works perfectly fine. So what happens here is these parameters are passed in as num1 and num2. Then this 5 takes the value of num1 is 5. Then since we concatenate the string, the value stays the same and num2 stays the same as a string because it's concatenated. Then we concatenate space equal to space, and then we concatenate the result of number1 divided by number2. Okay, so let's do this. Now let's test our second value, 5 divided by 3, run. This is also a correct result. 5 divided by 3 is equal to 1 in Java. -3 divided by 5, run. It's going to be negative. Oh, well, it's not going to be negative because it's going to be equal to 0. Because when you divide two integers, it's going to return only the integer value of it, not the decimal points. And then we come to 5 divided by 0. Now, here you're thinking that this is not going to work, right? Yes, this is not going to work. So this is what we need to do, right? We need to add an if condition since we know that since we already know how to use if statements. Let's just add an if statement here, and we're going to say if number2 is equal to 0, not a single equal to sign, double equal to sign. We're going to check for a condition. Then we're going to print out that you can't divide by 2. I'm sorry, by 0, right? I was thinking number 2. So you can't divide by 0. Now, what will happen is our code will come here and it will print this out, correct? Yes, it will. And I run this. And let me open up the console. Actually, this got printed. However, my code got an error, an exception, saying that even if you read the exception, let's actually start reading exceptions and making sense out of them. It's called Java lang. This is the package name, obviously. Arithmetic exception is a class name. And there is a comment here. Division by 0. It means it is not right. It's arithmetic exception. At section 3_1, this is our package name. Defective divider is our class name. Divider is our method name, right? Line 19 has an error. This line has an error. And this line here, in this line, number 1 divided by number 2 obviously returns us an error, right? Also, the error message also contains our main method, saying that this call was originated in main method line 8. So from now on, please start reading your errors if you haven't done so up until now. And then it prints out you can't divide by 0. And we're thinking that, all right, if it prints out you can't divide by 0, then obviously we're fine, right? What if I call this method divider and I want to test this last condition as well. When I run this code, what happens is my code breaks, right? What happens is, since Java throws an exception because we're trying to divide by 0, my code comes here, it breaks, and it completely breaks the whole program. So let's say if you have any line behind after this, it will not work. So let's actually, so when I added this method call here, I wanted to show you that even though the break happens in this method call, your main method is also disabled. Your program is terminated. Let me show you this way. Let me take this method out. And when I call this method and I try to divide 5 by 0, I'm going to get you can't divide by 0. I'm going to get an error, and I'm hoping to get the success message. Will I get it? No, I won't, because when error occurs, everything else stops. Okay. However, if I divide 5 by 1, I will get the success message. Now, obviously, what this means is that even though I'm warning the user that you can't divide by 0, I can't stop the user. I can't stop the program to continue to line 20 where it's going to divide by 0, right? There is a special command in Java called return. And when you add semicolon to it, this becomes a return statement. Return itself is a command, but obviously things have to be, Java runs by statements. So it's called return command or return statement. So what happens with the return statement is when compiler touches the return statement, it just completely runs away from the method, right? So the moment it touches this return statement, it runs away from it. It gets out of this method. If I have return in main, it will get out of a main too, because main is a method as well, right? So let's run this program now. 5 divided by 1, success, because our compiler did not touch this return. We have hidden this return inside our if statement, if block. So for the return to be touched by the compiler needs to start executing the if block, correct? So how can I get this if condition true? I need to make my number 2 equal to 0, right? So when I make it equal to 0, number 2 is equal to 0. This is going to be true, and the compiler is going to come here. If I run this, what happened is we got the message, you can't divide by 0, and that's it. There are no errors, no problems. So what happened is, put yourself in the shoes of a compiler. I start executing the program. I create a stack memory for my main method. Great. Within main method, I have another statement that calls another method. I create a stack memory space for the method called divider. Then I pass in values 5 and 0 as my arguments, number 1 and number 2. And then, before I do anything, I check for this if condition within this method. In this if condition, if number 2 is 0, I will run this if block, right? When I start running this if block, I get into the another method called printLine method, and I execute that method, and I move on to the next line. Here I see return, so I drop everything as a compiler and get out of this method. That's it. This method is executed, and I get back to my main. Now you probably have a question that does the main stop executing as well? So let's try it. 5 divided by 1. If you remember, when we did not have a return statement here, when we did this, compiler did not work. Compiler did not do it. Did not divide 5 by 1, right? Because our program got exploded. But now, when I have a return statement strategically hidden within my if statement, what happened is, the first time I tried to add 0, I tried to pass 0 as my second parameter. Since my if condition got executed, if condition became true, and my if block started execution, it printed out can't divide by 0, and then it hit a return statement. It completely turned off this method. Then we go back to our main method again. Let's move on. We completed this statement. Move on to the next line. We again calling this method. It's perfectly fine. We're again calling the method that we just run away from. But this time, when we execute this method, this condition here does not become true, so we do not see the return method as a compiler. If you want to test it, let's call 2 divided by 0 divider, for example, 0 divided by 0. Then we're going to say divider 0 divided by 5. Then we're going to say divider 2 divided by minus 4. If I run this, every single one of these methods will get executed. But the methods that have 0 as their second values will do nothing but print out a error message, our error message, saying that you can't divide by 0. And this here, these two messages will not appear. You want to test it? Let's run it. You can't divide by 0 coming from our first method call. 5 divided by 1 is equal to 5, success, coming from our second method call. You can't divide by 0 coming from our third. Then you can't divide coming from fourth. 0 divided by 5 is equal to 0. 2 divided by -4 is equal to 0. Okay? So this is a demonstration of return method. Do not use return method anywhere you wish. If you try to do this, if you hover over this code, it's gonna be called in Java jargon unreachable code, because every time you execute this method, you will get this return statement here, right? Because it is not within a specific condition, it will always be true. Since it's always true, this line here will never run. And a compiler tells you that you cannot do it. Just get to this line. Or make sure you're putting your return statement in the right place. If you add return statement in your main method, the same is going to apply. And beware, if you add a return method, let's actually do this. Let me actually demonstrate you that I'm going to create num. For example, I'm going to create a condition here. And let's do this. Let's actually create our local variables here. Num1 is equal to 5. Int num2 is equal to 0, right? And let's say I want to check whether I can divide by 0 or not within my main method. If I add this if statement here, if num2 is equal to 0, then return, right? When I run this program will just print out you can't divide by 0. As I said earlier, main method is also a method. It can be a little bit special, but it's nothing more than a method, right? And if you have a return statement in a method, anytime compiler touches that return statement, it's just going to run away from a method. And all these lines here will not be executed at all. But if you change the value of number 2 to 1, in this case, this condition will not become true. all the other methods within your main method, all the other calls will take place. All the other executions will take place. So again, make sure you double check where you're calling the main method, where you're placing it, and how you're calling it. So we will, down the road, we will see other options. We'll see other uses of the return method. This is a very powerful command in Java. But for now, I just want to let you know that in the next video, we will look at how to look at a flag method coming from scanner class, and we will put our knowledge up to now on conditional statements, relational operators, and logical operators into good use. So looking forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much for your time.